Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another show of the CXO show. Today, I have a very good friend of mine, and that is showing in the unusual excitement I have towards recording it. Saurabh, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Swapnil. You seems to be a natural anchor.
I need to put on a little bit of spunk as we get started. Don't worry, we're going to get back to us being normal. But yes, I'm very excited. I have Saurabh, who I have worked with, known for a very, very long time, at least 10 to 12 years. And while I'm going to read out a formal introduction of Saurabh, I have to preface by saying that Saurabh is one of the smartest learning and development professionals I've come across in my tenure in this particular industry, and I'll share more about it as we go and talk about. But welcome to the CXO show. This is a show that features some of India's best and most successful professionals across a broad array of different vocations, but our focus is typically HR and L&D because, of course, we're a learning and skilling company. Who else do we get but our esteemed friends in the space of HR and L&D? Saurabh, I hope that this is Friday is a good Friday afternoon, evening for you doing this conversation, because typically when we're talking, it's typically related to work. So this is a slightly more broader conversation.
So for me, Fridays are no different than other weekdays. We are always
Okay.
choked with work. You'll have to figure out time for friends like you to do this.
That's why
Otherwise,
I
it's
need
not easy.
correct. I need to actually arrange for create shows like this, like the CXO show, to get 1 hour of your undisturbed time. See what I need to
Yeah,
do, to what lengths I need to go. Anyway,
yeah.
before we get started, and otherwise Saurabh and myself will keep fooling around, but before that, I'm going to quickly read an introduction of Saurabh Wadhwa, my friend. Saurabh is the Executive Vice President and Head of Organizational Learning for Kotak Mahindra Bank. Saurabh has more than 19 years of hands-on experience when it comes to learning and development in the BFSI sector. He has held key L&D portfolios with organizations like Kotak Life Insurance, IndusInd Bank, and Bajaj Finserv prior to his current role at Kotak Mahindra Bank. An alumni of IMT Ghaziabad, Saurabh is an expert in setting up training functions with experience in designing training strategies and training architecture, conducting training need analysis, developing training solutions and roadmaps, and implementing these strategies and measuring their effectiveness. His colleagues describe him as an expert in the L&D domain. I would describe him as that too, and as someone who believes in developing and shaping learning journeys based on a company's business and talent management strategies. He's a dynamic and energetic facilitator. I can vouch for that again, whose biggest strength is that he invests a considerable amount of time to understand the desired outcome of a learning program and works to blend business and training agendas in the final outcome. Saurabh, I can put my stamp of approval on this entire introduction of yours, because I know that this is not a hollow introduction, but everything that is mentioned here is something that you actually do actually believe in. And before we get started, I have to mention that you believed in a lot of these things close to 12, I don't know, 13 years back when we first met. And if you remember, we were conversing about these things that were, I'm assuming, not a little ahead of its time, right? Those were concepts that weren't really prevalent, at least in the Indian L&D. And I remember you throwing a lot of light around the importance of journeys, implementation, measurement, bringing business and training agendas together. So I think you were way ahead of your time. So amazing that you were.
I'm surprised that you're saying so many things. I don't believe that about myself. I feel I'm still a learner. I am learning with people, interacting with people like you, and learning in the process. Uh, and I still see that I have a long way to go.
Yeah, I think we all do. Quite honestly, I think what's that quote? The quote that says, "The more you learn, the more you
Yeah,
realize how much you don't know." Right.
yeah, exactly.
So I think that's true with all of us, and I think a basic recognition of the fact that the wisdom is knowing how much you don't know in the end, right?
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
you're a big proponent of that. So Saurabh, before we get started to other questions, I first want you to quickly run our audience through your journey, right? Starting from college all the way to where you are right now of learning and development head of Kotak Bank. So just run us through that journey so people understand your background a little bit.
So, Swapnil, I must tell you that nobody has ever asked me this question, but if I start telling you, then my history would take about almost half an hour. But I'll try and uh,
Yeah.
keep it sharp. So, I
Yeah.
started my career in immediately after my schooling. So,
Mm,
coming from a middle class family, I realized that I would have to self-sustain myself if I have to study further. My
very
first job was a sales job while I was selling room coolers for a company called Usha Lexus
mm,
in Asaf Ali Road company showroom. I
mm,
spent some months. I had my own piece of learning in sales where I
mm,
struggled a lot and
mm,
understood that what it takes to be a good salesperson.
mm,
Thereon, I got an opportunity to work with Godrej GE, and this time I was selling refrigerators and washing machines. So,
mm,
selling room coolers to washing machines and refrigerators, I realized that uh, there's a lot that you need to do, work with people, and how do you sell better. There's so much
mm,
of it that you need to learn.
mm,
And standing up at a dealer counter and making those sales and looking forward to earning incentives was something, it just kind of got into me, and I realized that I was loving it.
mm,
Over a period of time, I moved into Thomson Consumer Electronics. This time I was selling televisions, and then people started saying that if you can do so well in sales, why not help people sell better? So that is
mm.
how I transitioned into sales training.
Got
So
it.
the first formal assignment in sales training was with Kotak Life Insurance, where
Wow.
I started training life insurance advisors on selling how to sell life insurance and the basic
Mm,
concepts of life insurance, because we say life insurance is the most difficult financial product to be sold. It's
yeah.
it's something that uh, it is always sold, never bought, because people don't
Mm,
have a need for it. They don't
yeah.
feel for it. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I did that. Then after being in sales training for about few years, I got a chance to move as a management development facilitator, where I started
Mm,
training managers and supervisors, and
mm,
then moved into leadership development over a period of
mm,
time.
mm,
Then, from delivery to, I realized that the time has come for me to move into looking at learning strategy. That opportunity
mm,
came in IndusInd Bank when I joined in as a zonal training manager for learning for
mm,
North, and eventually grew up
mm,
to head of learning and development for consumer banking, which is the retail bank.
mm,
And that's where
mm,
I learned the relevance of learning journeys. How do you
mm,
actually take learning, transform people through a learning journey? Because an episodic learning does not transform people. You have to
correct.
work with them to make, transform and
Yeah.
bring that change in behavior.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. Yeah.
spent about good 8.5 years with that company. And
Mm,
then the another firm that offered me was NBFC. So I had done life insurance and banking. This time I said, look, I've done enough of banking. Let me try something else. And then it was NBFC. I moved to Bajaj Finance at Pune. 3 years, I think I had one of my most wonderful time at Bajaj Finance, because I
amazing.
was taking care of organizational development, change, culture, leadership development, and also
Mm,
all programs. And one of the key programs that I did was leaders as trainers. I realized
mm,
learning can only be sustained if the leaders join hand along with you, partner with you to deliver programs. And there's a
mm,
consistency of language that you bring in classroom and outside classroom.
got it.
And I've won few Brandon Hall awards in Brandon Hall award for leaders as trainers, and couple of Brandon Hall awards even before that. So three
Mm,
years with Bajaj Finance, and then uh, I just happened to be in Kotak Bank. It was homecoming for me. Uh, I was offered a position at Kotak, and then here I am at a CLO at Kotak Bank right now since last 4 years.
amazing, amazing journey. I think a lot of your the maturity that you have as far as learning and development as a professional, I think, comes from your early days of actually doing the job, so to speak, right? Those sales jobs, the amount of insight that would have given to you for how a frontline executive really thinks about his work would have been invaluable, I'm assuming,
Absolutely, absolutely.
right?
But
And
I tell you,
yeah,
once you've done it by yourself and you grew
yeah,
up in the ladder by doing it, the
yeah.
sense of security that you always have in yourself, that no matter
Yeah.
what, you'll still be
Yeah.
able to survive and do it. Because
Yeah.
I feel that even if given an opportunity, I love to deliver programs, I can still stand up and
Yeah.
deliver. So
Yeah.
I feel that I'm there. So even if
Yeah.
I've grown to as a level of CLO, if I
Yeah.
have to tomorrow decide to be an independent consultant, I know I'll be good enough by delivering
Yeah.
a lot of programs for myself.
Yeah. I'm sure. No, I was talking more, Saurabh, about your actually, where you started off in your sales jobs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that kind of understanding of how business actually happens, because we have so many learning and development professionals sometimes go straight from college to a learning and development job, right? You get what I'm trying to say, right? And I
Yeah, I
find
know. I
that
know.
sometimes a bit of a, they don't have that real life experience of actually being on the shop floor, whether it's at the factory or being on the floor selling something, which actually gives you the insight into how learning happens, how the real job happens. All of those things come from those frontline jobs, if I'm not mistaken. What's your take on it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think uh,
Yeah.
the level of empathy that you have for those people is at a different level, because you've been there, done that by yourself. You've
Yeah.
you had your own lows and highs, and that you can relate with. And when you speak with people and
Yeah.
they share those experiences with you, it's so much relatable, because you
Yeah.
see yourself be going through that and being able to talk about your own experiences. So
Absolutely.
it's not something that you are never in a denial mode that this doesn't work like that. You say that this is how it happens. You learn through the process, and
Yeah.
the empathy that you build because you've been on the other side is far more, and you can relate with them. And
Yeah.
I think this also adds a lot of contextuality to learning that you do,
Yeah.
because a lot of times these structured process or models that we bring in to
Yeah.
learning interventions, these are highly researched models, but the real power comes with the context. And because you've
Mm.
done that, the context is powerful as well.
Correct. I think that's a very, very good point for anybody that's listening to this, right? In terms of saying, while all the models on learning and development are good, right? But if you don't bring in context into what you're doing, that can lead to the failure of that particular learning model. And context often comes from having that real life experience. I often tell
Right.
people that don't have that experience that listen, hey, be as close to business as possible, right? Go and talk to business. Go, if you're a L&D person, go to the branch, sit there for a day, actually see what happens at the branch, right? What does that teller need to go through, or what does that person need to go through before you design a learning intervention for him, right? If you're designing something for the call center, please like go there and sit there for a while, yeah, and really see
Right.
what their life is. Otherwise, how are you going to design something which is effective? And I think that reality is very, very important for. So Saurabh, you were telling us about your slightly unconventional approach that you have towards dealing with business when they come to you with learning and development requirements, which I'm quite fond of actually. So if you could throw some light on that.
So there are few things that I always do when I get into interactions. Number one, I don't follow a menu card approach. I don't
Okay.
have list of programs that I go with.
Hmm.
I I typically go with what I understand of some business challenges that they may be experiencing.
Got it.
And I start with what are the business challenges that they are experiencing, and what
Yeah.
solutions do they foresee for these. A lot of times when they ask for learning, and I
Yeah.
need to ask, why do they feel that they need for learning?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm not there to sell learning. And I firmly believe that learning can't transform people.
Yeah.
Uh, it's the ecosystem which has to work along with learning, which can help transform and
Yeah.
help achieve the desired business outcomes.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
only can happen when there's a strong partnership between business and
Yeah.
any function, maybe learning or
Yeah.
a support or an enabling function. So
Mm.
I see things from a lens of ecosystem and not
Yeah.
from what the learning needs to do. When I
Yeah.
say ecosystem, what I mean to say that I also see what do we need to bring a change in terms of language that needs to be used across
Yeah.
the business and not
Yeah.
just with the set of people. I
Yeah.
see things from a design standpoint, that is there a design work, ways of working that needs to change. And when I
Yeah.
say ways of working, it could also include uh, changes in systems, changes in policies, changes in SOPs, changes across everything, and maybe sometimes even changes in the way they sit across a desk when you are talking about bringing collaboration within teams. Because
Yeah.
if they are facing walls and not looking at each other, how do you expect them to collaborate? So
Yeah.
looking at things holistically and not
Yeah.
from what do you expect people just to do differently. So that's my because that gives me a lot of excitement that I'm making a shift which is
Mm.
sustainable and long term and not just
Correct.
momentarily.
Correct. I think that's very interesting. And I know because we've had conversations on this offline, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Where, we've spoken about, and which I truly appreciate because you really go in with your business stakeholder as being a consultant and
Hmm.
not saying that the solution to everything lies in some kind of a learning intervention, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the solution could lie, like you said, SOP change, design change, seating change, incentive change. And if
Yeah.
you remember one of the conversations, I don't know when we had this, but you just talked about a certain business coming to you with a challenge of, say, motivation, right? And
Yeah.
you said, okay, tell me a little bit about their incentive structure, and then you analyze that particular incentive structure and said, hey, this can't be solved by learning. This is solved by sorting out the incentive structure or payout or whatever that problem was at that particular vertical in that organization, right? And that gave a better solution to the business than thopoing some learning intervention on them, right? So I think I think this is a good tip for anybody in the learning and development world, right? That when you're going out to your business stakeholder, ensure that you're not just trying to operate as a L&D professional, but you're truly going there as a consultant that will, of course, look at L&D, but possibly throw light and inquire and probe about all the different areas that could be the solution to that problem which is there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tell you, it's not that we don't. I always go back and say no to learning. I say,
Yeah.
how far can learning support you, and what is
Yeah.
that you need to do so that it's sustained over a long period of time,
Mm.
that you solve problems for in time to come and not for today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's an extremely effective approach, right? Because for some reason, even in my experience, most business stakeholders that talk to you think that all problems are problems of a behavioral or a skill level being changed, but often are blind spotted towards a lot of other things which are there. I also really like the line which anybody listening can take back in terms of saying that you focus on changing the ecosystem and not just the learning and development, right? I think that's really operating as a true team player within an organization as well, because and often I get tired of saying this, right? When a lot of people like you, actually, not you, but people like you say, "Hey, what's going to be the ROI on this program, or how do I know that I've really got something out of it?" And I'm like saying that, hey, how can I guarantee you results? Because I'm just one slice of the pizza, right? There
Yeah.
are so many things that you need to get right for us to really see a change in that business result or whatever it is that we're looking at. There are so many elements which are there, and when they come together entirely, including the L&D piece, that is when a problem is solved for business, right? But a lot of L&D people don't really think of it that way, but I'm glad you've always thought of it that way, right? When Saurabh, tell me, you've been a pretty early proponent of the journey based thing, way of doing stuff, right? And not just doing sporadic intervention. Where did that belief come in, even 12 to 15 years back, that that is the way to go, which is now almost a norm in learning and development? But where did that thought come from?
So when I see journey, I think the most
Yeah.
important part of is that uh, what you can accomplish in a learning intervention and
Mm,
what would they take to bring a change in behavior. The
mm,
moment you move away from a facilitator lens to a
mm,
consultant or a solution architect lens, you start
mm.
visualizing everything possible that will help bring the change in behavior or bring the
Yeah.
change in way of doing things.
Yeah.
The moment you are a facilitator, you would like to give your best, do that,
Mm,
engage
mm,
with audience, get them to explore and find out answers within themselves, challenge them,
mm,
instill confidence by creating success, making them
mm,
stars and heroes in the program. They walk
mm,
out very happy. But
mm,
again, when you meet up after 3 months, they say that, look,
mm,
boss, I was very happy, but I think that wasn't enough. I need more. Because
mm,
when I say it's not about doing more, it's how about we sustain that. Then I started visualizing what will it take to sustain learning. Anything that has to be sustained, there are few principles that you need to follow. Number one, first, the repetition is the mother of retention. How you reinforcing those learnings time and again through using every possible medium to sustain that. Because if you are not retaining that, you don't expect the change. First thing is that, are you retaining it? Number two, is the organization sending also the same signals to you that this needs to be applied on the job? And how it can happen, I always firmly believe that it's a supervisor's or a leadership alignment that needs to be done in terms of language and in terms of sometimes co-delivering the program along with you, so that they feel that it's an organizational initiative and it's not L&D initiative.
Very interesting.
And the sponsorship comes from there. Anything that you do, and when they move out and the language is different when it's spoken by manager, believe me, it does not result into any sustained learning after that. So language has to be. So my interventions doesn't start with the role holder. My intervention starts with the leaders first and then goes down to the role holder. The alignment part is most important for me.
So interesting.
Number three, I also feel that it is not that you've done something and reinforced it and aligned it will result into change in behavior. Everybody has a set of challenges which could be very unique and different. How do you bring in elements of group coaching, hand holding, supporting, and measuring how they are applying? Because a lot of times when they come back and say that, look, I applied and I still experienced a few challenges, then you get deep into what the challenges are and how do you address that. And that becomes a part of the sustenance through a group coaching model that we bring into a program. And realize that when people find that they learned the core, they applied, but there's little more, the incremental value that they get out of group coaching takes it to the last mile to bring that change in behavior. And then you reward behaviors and not just the outcomes is important. So putting all these things together is where it makes it possible. And that's how I see this only help, because when you feel that you don't want to keep doing same thing year after year and say that last year sales kiya tha, now let's do another sales program this year, old wine in a new bottle. The idea is, are you making a shift from point A to point B? Now the next year has to be point B to point C. You start again point A. And that's what we start, think journeys and anything else.
Correct. I think that's very interesting. I'm going to try to summarize a few of the elements that you spoke about that I think is important. Very rarely do I find learning and development professionals talk about the power of repetition, right? Repetition, right? And I think repetition is so important, because if you don't repeat stuff, it's not going to get retained. And if it's not going to get retained as a thought somewhere with you, they're not going to apply it if they can't even retain the learning from that particular program, right? There are a couple of thoughts that came to my head, right? There's this very nice thought that says the 10th time that a leader is saying something is the first time his team is listening to it, right? Which is such an interesting one. The 10th time, and I say the same. Yeah, I think that I tell people the same thing is true in L&D, right? The 10th time that you tell them something is the first time that people are listening to it.
And you won't reach the 10th time till you start the first time.
Yeah, correct. You're right. So that becomes very, very important. And even if, there's another thought that says, and this is so true, you'd be able to relate it to our personal lives as well, where, a good leader is one where, his team can mimic him in some way, right? Right. So if your team, when they're going to a business stakeholder, in a way will know that, okay, Saurabh would have dissected this like that. And that mimicking is not a copying thing, right? They've learned from constantly you driving certain messages in them, so that they know exactly what you're going to say at what point. And exactly like when we were kids, we would in a way be able to mimic what our parents would say in different situations, right? That you say, "Arey, yahan pe pakda to ab yehi bolne wali hai." You get what I'm trying to say, right?
Absolutely.
So that power of repetition, I think, is very important. The second point I think, which you spoke about again for the L&D folk on this conversation, is I think leadership alignment, along with, like you said, core delivery sometimes of leadership is so important, because that's the one piece that doesn't get done more often than not, right? We're doing programs without aligning leaders, and we at our end, as Work Better earlier and now as Upgrad, we've taken so many initiatives, micro and macro, that really help align leaders of those programs, so everybody is speaking the same language organizationally, right? I think that's very important, because another valid point that you spoke about is, if something happens in the learning program, but if it's not carried on and a different signal is given post learning program, that signal often is more important than what the facilitator said, right? The signal of the
Absolutely.
manager or the boss. And again, thinking of the last mile, now I'm sure both of us know, Saurabh, that all these things are easier said than done. And when you try to execute something like this, it's a nightmare. We know that. But I think at least this needs to be the attempt that we make. What do you think?
Absolutely. And there are cases when I have also delivered programs because business only want episodic interventions. We have to do it. But
Yeah.
my focus is always that how do I look at every learning need to be as an OD initiative,
Yeah. Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
lens of that it's sustained, uh, it's a systemic change,
Yeah.
it's progressive, it's not just adds value to the people who we're targeting at, but the business as a whole. How do we make the necessary change in the systems that they work sometimes is also part of it too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the way they record their MIS, the way they look at data differently, a lot of it
Yeah.
come together. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, true,
yeah,
true. I think that's absolutely right. And again, I think just to add to what you said, I think episodic learning also has its space, right?
yeah, absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
exactly like, for example, Netflix has its space, and probably
Yeah.
a YouTube Shorts has its place, right? Both things are different pieces of content, and both are good, but both are different, right? Because, but I think just the thinking around those episodic uh, stuff needs to be a little different. And correct me if I'm wrong, and tell me what your view on that is, right? Because
Mm,
typically when I'm talking about an episodic thing, identify exactly what you want to improve in that episode, right?
mm.
But again, you can use that same logic that you were talking about, but most people will want to say, hey, I want to cover 10 things in 6 hours, please do it, right? You get what I'm trying to say? It's neither here nor there in some way. But even episodes where you just say, hey, this team has a problem of cold calling, for example, right? And the only thing that we will focus on in these 2 days is just that one micro skill of cold calling, and we won't focus on anything else. I think episodes like that can work very well for business
Very
if
well.
thought through well.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I
Yeah,
think then even that episode can be broken down into a journey, small journey, which is
correct.
uh, the steps of doing and concepts of doing a cold calling, where to
Yeah,
reach is
yeah,
what comes as a pre. How to do
yeah,
it is comes
yeah,
as a program,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you possibly reinforce it by
yeah,
using some of the real used
yeah,
cases and
yeah, yeah.
situations that you could show them and on recorded videos. So
Absolutely.
it's
Right.
always can be in a learn, practice, and apply approach, which
Yeah,
is
and
learn
also
it, you
just
practice it, and then you put into application.
yeah,
Yes,
and also in terms of the actual application of it, you can, again, I'm taking away from your point of leaders being aligned. You can align the leaders in what they've
exactly.
been taught in that particular thing, to ensure that whatever feedback they give after that is aligned with the training, right? In some way, because very often when people think journeys, they often think 9 months, 12 months, right? A journey could be a very short journey in itself, right? Which may
Correct.
look like an episode, but you could have those same elements that you spoke about that are part of that little episode, right? We can call that a mini series of sort, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
multiple seasons of it, but
yeah.
a mini season. Yeah, so I think that's very interesting. So sort of tell me, as somebody that's really been learning head at different places, what today is keeping a learning and development head up
Mm.
at night, right? And I don't want you to tell me about your company in specific or your industry in specific, but you're also a well-known figure in the community. So what are the two or three things that are keeping L&D heads up at night?
Hmm. Uh, I would not know what is keeping up at night to other L&D heads, but I can definitely tell you what is keeping me up in head is
Yeah,
that now we've been able to strongly integrate with business and become a part of business and work with them. I think one of the things that's keeping me up in the night, that how do the larger HR team understands the way learning needs to be done? Or that's my biggest challenge at this point of time. I feel the larger HR team also needs to be aligned to the way, because a lot
Yeah.
of time learning is working on personalization, whereas
Yeah.
the larger HR team looks at one size fit all because they have one policy for all employees, and that's the lens that they
Yeah.
come from.
Yeah.
Sometimes the lens has to change to the other side of it, to the HR. That is sometimes keeping me awake. That how do I align my peer and partners
Correct.
to how they need to look at things differently and personalize it, and not
Correct.
do one size fit all,
Correct.
and not do episodic, and look at
Correct.
solutioning rather than just a program. The other
Correct.
thing that I feel that is keeping me up at night today is how would I help the talent to empower talent uh, to acquire skills what they choose, careers what they wish to take, and enable them to acquire skills what they want to possess. A lot of
Mm.
times it's driven by the organization, but there's a need also comes from an individual, that look, while I'm maybe in today as an engineer working in the area of, let's say, operations, but I want to move into analytics, or I want to move into a technology role. Can I enable that? Because my organization has almost 7,000 unique roles. How can I find this talent in the company, empower that talent, give him the required skills, and help him transition into the roles that he wants to do rather than the organization wants him to do? That's
I
another
think
area that I am really, really thinking to crack it, and how do I crack it?
that's so interesting. I think that's I've never thought about the second issue actually as much, right? But now that you bring it up, it's just such an important issue, right? Because I think what a lot of people often don't realize is the importance of corporate learning, right?
Yeah,
Because so much of your actual learning happens on the job, right? And not in college in any way. It happens on the job. And if you have a strong L&D team that can facilitate learning, people can absolutely, like you said, literally go on and make new careers in new fields
yeah,
that they realize their
yeah.
probably passion lies in or their strength lies in, right?
Correct, correct.
You get my point of what I'm trying to say. See,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
you started off as a sales guy, right?
Mhm.
Somewhere, I don't know, you must have been proactive. Something happened and you got that break into learning, and then you quickly learned on the job, right? So to speak,
Absolutely.
with your mentors. But everybody needs to have that opportunity, right? Everybody needs to have that opportunity of saying that, hey, I don't want to do this role anymore. I want to take that analytics role. How can my organization really equip me quite beautifully to,
Yeah,
make that transition into a role? And then you literally, Saurabh, if you think about it, it's you given the person a new college in a
yeah,
way, right?
yeah.
You've given him a new university, you've given him a new college within the ecosystem of working
Mm.
and making money, right, while doing it. So this the importance of this work that we do, sometimes even we don't realize,
Yeah.
right, that is the kind of role that we play. So I think that's a good thing to keep you up at night, because I know when you're up at night, you're going to come up with some good solutions to it that I guess then all of us can learn. Sort
Yeah.
of, what advice would you have for learning and development, a young learning and development professional that is just entering the world of learning and development, right? And I'm talking about this professional actually at the company end, right? He just joined a Kotak Bank, or he just joined a Yes Bank as a learning and development professional. What would your two or three pieces of advice be to that young person in order to be a phenomenal learning and development professional?
That's the usual advice I give it to everybody is,
Mm,
number one is, don't fall into the trap of having preconceived assumptions.
mm. Tell me a little
Because
more
at
about that. What do
times,
you mean? What do you mean by don't
let
have
me tell
preconceived?
you,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, I ask my people, and like everybody in a L&D professional, when they say, it's a sales guy, the challenge would be this part of it, and hence this is a solution. The idea
Mm,
is that unless and until you don't keep your assumptions out and you
mm,
start, because everything change on a daily basis. It is
mm,
then not have your stay with your assumptions forever. So
mm,
that's the first, and it's not easy, because I always say that uh, you start with asking more and listening more. First of all, start
mm,
understanding what is the need, actual need is, and not have assumptions.
mm,
But I've seen,
mm,
for example, I had a team member, and somebody, like, I'll give you a classic example. A business guy would come over and say that, look, I have my set of people who are on managerial roles and I need a managerial
mm,
program. He would
mm,
instantly jump into saying that, look, let me do a program on the power of giving critical feedback, uh,
mm,
doing goal setting, etc. Not really
mm,
getting deeper into it, what the real problems are. And I would say,
mm,
what are
mm,
the typical challenges that your team is experiencing at this point of time? Or what is, give me an example of a used case that where you feel that these people are not able to demonstrate the managerial uh, qualities or managerial capabilities that they're supposed to demonstrate.
mm,
When I
mm,
get those deeper into it, not only that I get the
mm,
context, I really understand the problems as well. A lot of
mm,
times when a sales guy need to go through a selling program, a service guy needs to go through a service program, a managerial program means a general feedback program does not apply. You need to dig deeper and find where the problems are, because
mm,
I'll tell you, the 70% of the time has to get into identifying the real problem. If you've
mm,
identified the real problem, the solution design becomes really super easy after that, because you know what you need to create a program or a design to revolve around the use cases that you have and the problems that you're trying to solve, not just
mm,
follow it. That, and I always say that it starts with my set of population, that how I do it, because when people come back, look, you need to do it, I want to say that, are these people who are freshly transitioned or these are old
mm,
managers? My question is that,
mm.
because I always classify my target audience
Correct.
into four
Yeah.
categories, which is new to company, new to role, old in the company, new in the role, which is the
Mm,
transition people when they move into
correct.
old in the company, old in the role, and
Correct.
new in the company, old in the role, because that gives
Correct.
me some idea that where these people
Correct.
are. And
Correct.
I need to then start probing differently to these set of people. While, so if I know that they are managers for a year, then I would say they're already manager for years. That
Yeah.
means they've been performing a role of a manager. And what are
Yeah.
the typical challenges that you feel these people have while you do it? Give me use cases, give me examples.
Correct.
How do
Correct.
you see them do this differently? That also comes
Correct.
from the business, because my questions
Correct.
are such, and I
Got it.
have created a detailed TNI questionnaire and a diagnostic questionnaire, which gives me actually a lot of things, which is as it state, desired state, what is the
Mm,
problem statement, uh,
mm,
how does a business would like to solve it. And when I
mm,
have all this, that
mm,
becomes such a powerful brief for me to create a solution and a design. I don't
mm.
know if I've been able to help you, but
Yeah,
then,
I think you've been able to help me, but that's what I was thinking, right? So I think one major area that you spoke about for a young L&D person, which I think is fantastic, is no preconceived notions,
yeah,
ask more, listen more, talk less,
yeah,
ensure that spend 70% of your time identifying the real problem, which is going to be through your questions that you're really going to identify that real problem, because once you do that, solution design becomes really easy, right? So
very
that's
easy. Believe
your
me, that's how I
first
look
tip
at it. Yeah.
to people, which I think is a fantastic first point, right? That covers a lot of things, and I think is very important. What else would you say for somebody entering, young learning and development professional entering? What else do they need to know to
At a
succeed?
zoom out view, another thing that I would
Yeah.
say is that keep learner at the heart of everything. And I
What do you mean
always
by
say,
that? Yeah.
most organizations talk about being customer centric. I say that it work uh, otherwise, because if you want to be customer centric, you got to be employee centric, and if you want to be
Mm.
employee centric, you got to be learner centric. So
Very interesting.
how do you look at learning solutions which is absolutely learner centric, that you understand your learners like anything else. That it's and I do look at design thinking principles a lot. That means how much data that you have about your own set of learners, how much information that you have. And in this case, the more is less. The more data and the more knowledge or the information or ways of working that you have it about for learners, the better your solutions would be.
Correct.
Is how do you develop?
But I just want to just simplify, sort of simplify, because I love your point of saying learner at the heart, and especially the breakdown that you've done. Give me a practical tip of what a fresh learning and development professional needs to do to keep the learner at heart. Because again, you spoke about design thinking, but I want something which is more palatable, right, for a young learning and development professional.
So I'll tell you, while we have these discussions with business, I spend about good 15 minutes to 20 minutes in the interaction, understanding a learner persona.
Correct.
Which talks about their background, which talks about their experiences, which talks about their language, which talks about what is the mindsets they currently operate out of, what is that they are driven by, what are their motivators. All these things, the detailed persona that I created makes me actually put myself into their skin, their shoes, is what I'm saying. The moment I step into their skin, their shoes, then I start feeling what will help me drive that. And then I look at design from mindset, skill set, and a tool set perspective, that what is a mindset shift that I need to do with if I am this person? What is the skills, additional skills that I need to have to be able to do that? And what is the tools that will help me apply? So one, putting yourself into the skin and the shoes of the learner and having an absolute in-depth understanding of a learner. And what is that they're driven by? What is the language? What is the lingo that they use? What is the maturity that they bring in? How well do they think on some of the business problems that they have in hand? So that is what you need to. The as a state has to be very strong, and that starts with learner persona.
Got it. I think that's very, very interesting, right? So the practical tip on your second point to say learner at the heart is one of the many things that you need to do. In that is to really understand the learner persona well across many different things that you just mentioned. And if you do that, that is in a way putting yourself in the learner's shoes once you really understand the persona of the learners for a certain intervention. I think that's a very, very powerful point. Anything else that you would share as a third point that a young learning and development professional needs to know? Tell me, I'll ask you one thing in specific. Give them one tip on dealing with business stakeholders that you haven't shared before, right? Because I think you're very powerful in terms of your ability to deal with different business stakeholders. So give them one tip on that really works.
So
go top of mind. Don't overthink.
No, I'm not overthinking. I'm just telling you another trap that L&D professionals get into is take business monkeys on their back completely. And they said that I will do it all by myself, which is not true. You can't do it all by yourself. You need to handshake, and that's the way to go about it, because there are things that you need to do and there are things that you need to collaborate to do. Of course, you play a critical role, but then it's a collaboration that needs to come into play. A lot of times, because the L&D professional says, look, at the end of the day, if you can't do it, let me show you how to do it. And that is a trap that you get into. You can show, of course, and that's required because you need to be a role model, but you can't say that, because getting into a trap, and that's where it starts with that, boss, you do great, please help me do always for me. And you are there to keep doing it for them. That's not the way to do it. You actually have to transfer capabilities for people to be able, that they should be able to do it independently. Another thing that we do it is, and when I say these capabilities, as when we do managers as trainers and managers as coaches as a program, because we feel that we can't be the coaches always. We need to create managers to be the coaches. And that's how you sustain it and transfer capability. And not take everything on their shoulders at times.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point. Saurabh, what have you seen as have you to start with? And if you have, what has that been? A change in your learner pre and post COVID? Is there anything that you're seeing which is different? And if so, what are those things?
Hmm. Pre and a post COVID. Uh,
Yeah.
I uh, I think uh, the shift towards the learning always drives some long-term objectives. But one of the things that I feel has happened is post-COVID is that the lens has moved to short-term a lot. That
Mm,
people don't know what will happen tomorrow, and there's always certain uncertainty about future. They want
mm,
to they want a quick kills, they want quick results. They
mm,
feel that I need to be given something extremely powerful that I can go back and do it and get
mm,
the business outcomes. That
mm,
has happened. But I think over a period of time, when the times become predictable and certain,
mm.
then the shift starts getting back to the long term and not to the short term. So that's what.
Got
And it's post COVID, the focus is a lot more short term and it takes time for people. But they don't know
it.
what
Got it.
would happen. And the uncertainty came in, and that was very strongly settled in the minds of a lot of leaders. And then
Correct.
hence it was a problem then.
Got it. Got it. I think that's very, very interesting. Have you seen anything, any trends in terms of physical in classroom adoption versus online learning adoption post COVID? Is there a shift where people want to be with other
Another,
people?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So from a learning, so that I was always
Yeah.
starts with my business lens here
Yeah. Yeah.
that you stated that
Yeah.
it's a learning lens that I need to
Yeah.
have while I'm
Yeah.
answering it.
Yeah.
Yes, the learner behavior has changed because
Yeah.
now uh, the on the go learning at a point of time learning has become far more relevant and important. It was
Mm,
there earlier as well, but suddenly
mm,
it's become a way of life because
mm,
uh, we've understood that it's not possible every time to get people in the classroom. You
mm,
need to use technology in a big way
mm,
to do it. And the technology adoption has gone to a next level completely.
mm,
And today
mm.
people say that uh, don't just focus on building capability, but help me enable it while I'm doing it on the job.
Mm.
Is that
Got
has
it.
come into a focus, and
Got
the
it.
to enablement, the learning is started focusing on enabling people and not just building capabilities.
Got it.
Also,
Got
that
it.
has happened. Yeah.
Got it. That's interesting. Well, one of the things that I think one of the big advantages in a post-COVID world that has happened, which I have seen, is there's somehow a larger adoption of both things, right? People are used to consuming a lot of stuff online and on the go. That is
Mm.
happening. But there's also a big craving of saying that, hey, you know what? I also want to be in classrooms, physical classrooms with my peers. I want to, in a way, keep work aside for one day and really immerse myself into a learning environment in some way, right? So I'm seeing both adoption of digital ways of learning, and also the need for people to go back in a physical classroom
Mm.
and that, right? So I'm seeing both things.
Yeah, yeah. And I must tell you that I
Yeah,
think the solution, when we look at solutions, we look at blended solutions.
yeah,
Earlier, we used to look at digital plus instructor led. Today, we have
yeah.
far more options of digital plus virtual instructor led plus classroom intervention.
Plus,
So
yeah,
it's far more robust for us, and
yeah,
that helps us give learner experience, taking learner experience to a different level. And
got it.
I don't see any of these independently can achieve the outcomes. It has to be a
Correct.
comprehensive solution using all different methodologies of learning to a learner, which is
Got
a
it.
combination of self-paced, digital, mobile, web,
Got it.
virtual instructor-led and classroom, etc. And that's the
Got
need. That's where it has gone up, I believe. And we
got
use
it.
a lot of bite-sized learning and videos where it's
Yeah,
suddenly become highly popular with people. And then we
yeah,
also get people to do a roundup discussions what they learned it by what they consumed. And we call them and we
correct.
facilitate a discussion by only asking questions and not imparting learning. Because if they've
Got
consumed
it.
it, you kind of do a roundup discussions thereafter with them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the more and more I'm talking to senior learning folks like that, I think everybody is realizing realizing or will realize that even in terms of digital learning, gone are the days where we can create boring e-learning modules
Correct.
and expect people to consume them, because people are busy consuming interesting learning content on forums like YouTube, right? And YouTube Shorts and Instagram, right? They're learning there.
We've
But I think
started
we,
using learning
yeah,
reels, by the way, and
yeah,
sometimes these learning reels helps us to build excitement about the learning interventions that they need to
yeah,
go through.
yeah,
These reels
yeah,
are 15 seconds to goes up to 1 minute of
yeah,
videos and
yeah,
only builds excitement. And that's
yeah,
that's something that we use it for our learning affair as well, but
yeah,
which
yeah.
you've been part of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's very interesting. Saurabh, as one of as somebody that's really done exceedingly well in your career, right? And you're like you mentioned, you're a self-made person, come from very humble beginnings and done extremely well in your career. I want you to remove your L&D hat for a minute and tell me about skills that you think, top three skills that you think are really important for a newcomer entering the workforce, right? Industry agnostic, vertical within the industry agnostic. What would your top three skills be for anybody entering the workforce today?
I think two skills that I always say that are very, very important, and rather,
Yeah,
I would not say one of them, rather three. One is interpersonal skills, your ability to network with people and move around
yeah,
and
yeah.
understand. The second is being consultative in approach, whatever you do. The idea
Correct.
is when the more consultative you are, the
Mm,
the more value you can add to yourself and to the business in turn, whichever or to the role that you are in, is the another
correct.
skill that I feel that's completely band agnostic, and also it's horizontal in nature, irrespective of a role. Because at
Yeah,
the end, whatever role you may be, you're not interacting with the system, you're interacting with people. And when you are
correct.
interacting with people, you're discussing problems. And when you are
Correct.
discussing problems, only way to address the real problems and being consultative is what
Very
I.
nice.
And the
Yeah.
third most important, I feel, is that uh, uh, how do you be more empathetic in your conversations? It's
Mm,
become suddenly in transactional business a lot of times that the
mm,
empathy is out of window. When you deal with your
mm,
people, when you deal with your customers, when you deal with your peers, the empathy
mm.
is being able to relate to them is extremely important, and that has to be
Yeah.
deeply ingrained with every individual, irrespective of the role, band, business uh, that they are part of. So yeah.
Got it. Got it. Very nice. So you'd start with the very important interpersonal skills. I couldn't agree with you more, because all business and all life in the end is about dealing with other human beings, right?
Exactly.
Your customer is a human being, your shareholder is a human being, your boss is a human being, your team member is a human being. So if you don't have that skill and ability to work and deal with different human beings, you're always going to be found wanting, right? There. I think
Absolutely.
your second point of being consultative, that was I like the point that you shared, that in the end, everything, that all work discussions primarily are problem solving discussions, right? I've never thought of it that way, but they are, right? They are, in some way, they're problem
Yeah.
solving. Sometimes the problems are simple, repetitive. Sometimes the problems are more complex, right? A person coming to a bank to get, withdraw his money, in some ways is a small problem that he's dealing with, to which he needs a solution, right? So all conversations in a way are around problem solving. So if you don't
Yeah.
have that consultative skill, I think that will really help anyone, right? In across any field. I think that again is very, very, very nice thing. Sort of tell me about facilitation a little bit, because you are a dynamic and energetic facilitator, as I called you at the start. A lot of people would be coming. So this answer you'll have pat at the back of your hand, but a lot of people would be coming to you that aren't facilitators, that have a love for teaching, and want to become trainers, facilitators, so on and so forth. What is the key to becoming a great facilitator, at least in the corporate world? What is the key to becoming a great facilitator? And I know you shed a lot of light on the business end, but I want you to square it down now to the facilitator, right? What do they need to do?
That's my favorite subject. I can go on and answer that again, but I'll tell you
Right.
what, as I'll start with why a facilitator is most important in
Yeah.
the entire solution. You may have been able to identify a right problem, create a wonderful design, but the distribution of that learning happens to a facilitator. That means
Mm.
if your distributor of learning is not the right person or right talent, then
Yeah.
the entire design and everything that you've put through is always goes down the drain. So
Yeah.
I firmly believe that we make sure that we meet up with all people who deliver programs for us. And what I
Mm.
typically look at is, and I want to tell you now, you are asking me to open up the
Mm.
recipe booklet, but I will still
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
I see a lot of facilitators come with the hat of being able to impress people, that they
Mm.
know it all, that
Yeah.
I have a lot of experience, I know it all, I've
Yeah.
been there, done that, and I want to impress people by the knowledge that I possess or the
Yeah.
the experiences that I have. The
Yeah.
the I think most important is the humility that I look at in a
Mm.
that
Mm.
means that you are required to sometimes get down to the level of people and become a part
Yeah.
of to bring that change, and
Yeah.
that's what is required. Number
Yeah.
two is the facilitator is not supposed to be a star but make learner a stars.
Mm.
Unless you walk out by saying that I can do this, I love doing it, I applied
Mm.
it in the classroom, I can also apply it in the real world. you
Mm.
you you've not achieved your success. It's not when they walk out they are discussing facilitator. They should be talking
Mm.
about what they can do rather than what the trainer can do.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of times when they feel that, wow, our trainer knows so much, I feel that
Mm.
you failed as a trainer. You
Mm.
have to make people believe that they can do it rather than not you can do it.
Got
That's
it.
facilitator. And I think their ability to connect at an emotional level with the
Mm.
participants is the most important, because uh, you don't change people at a cognitive level, you'll change people at
Mm.
an emotional level. How do you
Mm.
touch the right chord with them? And when they start believing that anything that they discuss with you, they open up to you, is they feel that there's a complete safe
Mm.
environment and they open up to their vulnerabilities, is where I feel the facilitator plays a critical role. Sorry, this is all by experience. I
Ab-
not theoretical. You don't expect me a theory
mm.
answer to it.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's exactly what I think you spoke about this very, very eloquently, because the way I typically put it, same message, different words, but I'd say, the trainer or the facilitator is, or the teacher is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah, agree.
That's your moment of truth, so to speak, right? So you can
Yeah,
do all the analysis, you can do all the design, you can have excellent content, but
yeah,
if the facilitator is not right, everything is, all your mehnat and all the hard work that you've taken up till that point really is gone a waste, right? So the where the rubber meets the road is the facilitator, and that's why he or she will always have a critical role to play in the dissipation of any kind of knowledge, or the learning that we require, right? So I hope, Saurabh, we are way past the time that we had allocated for this particular conversation. But as with all conversations with you, they're highly enjoyable. I learn a lot from them. You're very eloquent in what you share, so it's natural that we go past our normal time. I'm very excited, Saurabh, for all the things that you are going to go ahead and do in your hopefully long career that you have ahead. So best of luck, and I hope to keep working with you in the future as we go on as two L&D professionals that have known each other for a long time.
thanks a lot, Swapnil. I would only like to say that the firm belief is that keep things simple and do simple things right, and that's what I always stick to. I really don't. I'm not a person with jargons or not something. I've always been a practitioner, been there, done that, and likes to believe that common sense supersedes any other kind of a learning that you have. So
Yeah,
that.
true, true, true. And someday we'll have a conversation on how to build that common sense, right? Because we often use this term saying common sense is important, but how do one, that's a whole different conversation that we can have on another time, where I'll invite you on a show like this and we can have that conversation, because otherwise it's tough to get your time.
Yeah,
Saurabh, thank you very much for making the time out of your busy schedule, and I will see you soon.